Hi, Joy.
It's been a while. How are you doing?
I was trying to remember how long it's been.
Oh man, it was that tour in Denver and Honor the Earth thing.
Yeah, so that was the 90s, I guess.
Yeah, that's been yeah, 20 years ago.
You've been you've been very busy since then.
Oh my God, yeah.
Well, we're really proud of you. I mean, to be the poet laureate is quite something.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. We were talking about how long it had
Your
been.
new,
Was it?
your new. It's been for a long time.
Yeah, 20
Your
years,
new
20.
project is so cool. Your
Thanks.
new project that Barrett Martin, uh, the
Oh, yeah,
project
he co-produced and
Americans.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think usually I would just do 10 songs, and the reason we have like some of those poems, I've done Fear, and I figured, well, it's the time. There's people who haven't heard that at all, and where
I,
it has to do with the timing of this and where we are in the
I
world.
thought it
And
was a good idea.
yeah,
I was glad that you put stuff on there from before. I thought it
yeah,
was cool.
I was going to ask you about fear because I mean, on the album, and obviously you're calling it fear, but in the book, it's I give you back.
yeah. Well, it's just kind of morphed into the Fear poem or the Fear song.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that came a long time ago. That was when I first started writing poetry, and that poem came because I needed it. And it's helped a lot of people, but yeah, I really needed that poem.
That's
It's
cool.
one of
Mhm.
those poems like you read it and I read it and I thought, wow, I it's hard to imagine being able to step into it like that from what you've experienced and what others have experienced and to be able to just stand there in the face of the storm of that and say, um, you can have yourself back. And then the line about you're so afraid, fear, it was so evocative of what's going on in this country right now. Like just this just people being so afraid and causing so much hatred. And I was wondering, did you reach a point in your own life of like stillness in the face of all of that, of history and hatred and being left out of stories? And how did you reach a point where you needed and could write that poem?
I think I wrote it before I could have even written it. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah.
like some things come through, and this is creative people that you kind of you make the space, and then you're blown away. I've learned it happens in performance too, where things will come through, or I'll play something like, "Whoa, that's cool. Where did that come from? Thank you." As it goes by or it comes in. And that poem was like that. It was like, I think I was suicidal around that time. I realized that I was probably having what's called a nervous breakdown, but I didn't have the luxury of a nervous breakdown. I realized years and years later that I had come through so much, and we were right in the middle of Native rights movements, and I was dealing with, father stuff, mother stuff, raising two kids alone. I'd been banished from my family because of stepfather lies. I mean, there was just, I think it, and then being part of the native rights movements and working there, and then just in my own self as a young woman and my own contradictions. I feel like, what is it? There's a Chris Christopherson song line. I've always liked his writing about something being a walking contradiction or something, which which is what I feel like I am. And it all just started crumbling. But that period, it showed me how to call upon spiritual help. And sometimes it's in friends, and sometimes, of course, it's in the plants, and it's in the poetry. I mean, that's where it came. A lot of what I know has come through certainly experiencing poetry and music and so on, but also it's about listening. I mean, the art of music and the art of poetry are the two arts that are really closely aligned with listening. I mean,
Yeah.
everything is scientific discovering, becoming a human being, continuing to become, trying to develop as a human being, but it's all about listening. And so that poem came when it's like, okay, we're going to give you something that would be helpful and
Mm.
you can call upon it. But I've always wondered about that last line, thinking maybe I shouldn't have put that in there, you know. But come here, fear. I am alive, and you are so afraid of dying.
Blew
It
me
was an
away.
impulse I didn't really understand, but now I think because I do this, I've told people to do this. If something is really bothering, if there's a force or something, then you make friends with it, or you stop it and say, okay, you sit over here in this chair, fear. Get off my back. No. Or here, I'm opening a door in my heart. I'm going to take you out, and you can sit over here. So you can no longer unduly influence me, and now we can talk.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what that line was doing until recently, you know.
Does that make you experience like when you write? I've got so many questions, so Amy, just interrupt me. um,
I no, I love you're asking a lot of the same questions that I was thinking about, so it's perfect
yeah.
for me.
So does that give you a sense that your work is like channeled rather than you've constructed it?
I don't know.
That's
Channeled is a loaded word, but I think that's we as artists. I think of it as a two-part process. There's a part when I'm working that I'm not thinking. I'm feeling out stuff. It could be feeling out sounds, chords, or a melody will come through, or a phrase, and then I follow it. I follow it. I follow it. Then there's the other part where you bring out your tools. You bring out all your tools, and then you start crafting something. I think of it as a place for it to live. Whatever that spirit or whatever the spirit of that song or poem or wherever, you make a place so that it can be,
mm,
so that it can rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I didn't, I've never been good. I don't think I'd be good improving on words. Like, I really admire those rappers, those people that can just like on the spot with words. I can't do that.
So you just you are,
When I write, I write. When I write, I just,
it's separate
things
for
will
you.
improv will come up. Things will come up, but, or even if I'm performing, sometimes I'll add or change something.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like two different things. Like
Oh.
I was saying, I didn't start playing horn till I was almost 40. I walked away from music when I was about 16, 15 or 15.
Oh, okay. So you
Yeah,
were
I
okay.
like to sing. I
why
was
is that,
in,
Joy?
what's that?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just wondering why you walked away from music at that time.
Well, because when I was really young, my mother was really involved, had country swing musicians over, was doing demos, and I got to see her sing once, and she loved is Nat King Cole ballad. She's like those heartbreak kind of ballads. I'm kind of like that too, but and then when she and my father split up, the music left, and we got a stepfather who was, I realize now, he wanted to control. He was like a control freak, and he was twisted in his mind too.
Mm,
So, and those things like that can twist you, and that's when the music stopped. Around that time, I was taking playing clarinet. I played like in fifth grade, sixth grade, every once a week. On two, I think I had two with the same reeds the whole time. And then I went to junior high. I was in the band, and the teacher said, "We need sax players. We have some saxophones." And I raised my hand. They said, "Girls can't play sax." And after that, I didn't take any more music. I just walked away.
Was it momentous when music came back, or what? Did you? Was it more like a trickle into it, or emotionally was it momentous?
I think emotionally, and I think I've had to deal with a lot. The thing I've learned watching families and countries and generations is that we, in our family, they're so particular that we get charged. There's energy strands. So, say my mom let it go because of this, and I remember her telling me more than once, because it always bothered, she always regretted it. She was offered a job singing on the radio at 16. That's interesting. 16 and 16. I hadn't made that connection
Hmm.
before. She
Mm,
had been offered a job singing on the radio, but she was too shy and turned it down.
mm,
And I dealt with horrible stage fright. Even when I was on that opening for you guys for a few shows, I used to have horrible stage fright. It was almost debilitating.
Really?
And then at one point I thought, I went through, I could write a book about what I went through with that. And finally I thought, if I listen to the music, I'm fine. So I might be nervous before a show, I learned that that's energy, that it's given to you because you need that energy to be able to project and move with the
Mm-hmm.
audience,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of conversation that goes on. But I learned that if I just listen to the music, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it's like if I don't worry about stuff and I've prepared and just listen to the music, I can do that. But anyway, so back to your question about the it happening. Yeah, it was a little tricky because it's like coming into music and I was too much in my head at first, thinking about
Mm.
what I need to know
Mm.
and everything there is to know and what I don't know. So I let that get in my way for a while.
Yeah.
And now it still does now and then being older. And when I first started doing set in the early 1990, I'd go into a music store and guys wouldn't want to wait on me.
Sure.
I know you've got, yeah, you guys know about it. You know
Yeah.
about that. Or when I would go in with Poetic Justice and, of course, all guys except for Sue, the drummer,
Yeah.
and they would walk right past me. I'd hired them. I had hired the all of that, and they would walk right past me to John or somebody.
Wow. Yeah.
That story. But it's come. I feel like I've always had a lot of insecurities about music, but I love it. I mean, it's like I love it so much that it's almost too much.
mm.
Mm. I know how you, yeah. I
You
know
know
that
what
feeling.
yeah.
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 And the words are a little more secret. I think the difference is the words are a little more secretive. I can sit and write and I'm working on stuff in my space here and then to take them to that other place, it can be vulnerable, but it's also exciting. I've come to a much different place. So when you get to my age, you don't really care anymore about the, you just, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose?
I was going to
Yeah.
ask you about that too, because like sometimes people say about my and Amy's writing, oh, it's poetry, but I'll speak for myself. I know that to me, my writing is not poetry, that there's a kind of like a really helpful conduit, which is the music that makes the words more powerful,
Yeah.
in my opinion, like for my writing. And I think about that a lot because you're writing, I mean, you're a poet, sublime poet, and your words can stand on their own. And but then when you put them to music, it's like the double force, or the power of music that you say is almost too much. Um, and so for you, do you experience that much more, or a different experience when the music is added to the words? Or like what does music do to words?
Well, it lifts them up. It lifts them up. And I write differently if I'm writing a poem versus writing a song. Like How Love Blows Through the Trees, I wrote as a song.
Ah.
I wrote that as a song. I wrote Stomp All Night as a song. One Day There Will Be Horses, I wrote as a song. So it's different. I'm
Uh-huh.
still demanding where the words are, but it's different. It's a different approach. An American Sunrise, I wrote as a poem.
Mm.
Yeah, that's epic.
Yeah, I wrote it as a poem with song elements
Yeah.
looping through it. Rabbit invents a saxophone. It's a poem song, but yeah. Um, so it's kind of for me, it's a little bit different process.
Mm.
It's so I love that's what I one of the things I really love about you is I'm turned on to different people a lot of
Mhm.
times through your art, like TC Cannon or something,
Yeah, yeah,
like something I had never heard of. And then I'll be like reading something that you wrote and it'll say for this person and I'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to look up that person." And at the same time on this record also you're collaborating a lot on the first, parts of it. Yeah, it's like you're the perfect person to be a poet laureate because it's like your life you've just traveled and collected all these musicians and artists and collaborated with so many people and you're so open to it that it's such an organic experience that you're kind of archiving your whole life with yourself and these
Yeah.
things connecting with you all the time. It's like you're the axis and all these things are little spokes. It's I mean it's quite inspiring to me because I think Emily and I, that's one of our favorite things to do is collaborate. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not, you know, a tour is not really that fun unless we are touring with other bands that we want to hear.
Yeah.
Because just like you, sometimes before I go on, I get kind of nervous and I have to yawn a lot because I can't really get myself up to it. But if I go out and listen to whoever goes on before us, I'm there. Like I
Yeah.
always go out and hear whatever friend's opening for us because that's how I get into the show personally. And I feel like you've just had this really free, this ability to be very open and free in your life. And it's inspiring, you know, and collect all these different experiences and collaborations, which obviously you're a muse because all these people, you know, have worked with you and get something. It's neat. It's cool.
Yeah, it was wonderful to have, everybody, of course it is a collaboration. And then I think about how I came to be doing what I'm doing anyway.
Yeah.
You think about all these influence. A poem in itself is a collaboration. There's all kinds, or a song, there's all kinds. When we think in images and we think in lines, they come from all parts of our lives or from interactions.
Yeah.
It's like that. Even in a poem, every line is kind of somewhat of a collaboration of time and
Yeah.
experience. And then I think about coming up as I was very lucky coming up even as a young poet. I mean, I used to hang out, I was in the middle of it all. I was hanging out with Audre Lorde and
Mm.
June Jordan and
Wow.
Adrienne Rich and all those, they were all mentors.
Amazing people.
And then, then, I'm just hanging out, and then later you realize what a gift that
Yeah.
you were with these people, with
Yeah.
everyone. And then to get to be with you guys at that time. And then Bruce Coburn, he was on there, I remember, and going out and
Hmm.
thinking, oh my God, who is this person who is a poet, storyteller, singer, songwriter?
Did you hang out with Trudell, with John much? Did y'all collaborate much or do shows together ever?
Not a lot, but a lot of people, they always say, well, you must have been influenced, with John Trudell. And I said, no, the person, yeah, John was there, but that's not my early influence. It
Yeah.
was Jane Cortez. I
Huh.
don't know if you ever heard her poetry,
No.
but she was married at one point to Ornette Coleman, and they had a son,
Oh, wow.
Dinardo. And when I heard her do her poetry, it was in the late 70s, long before I picked up a saxophone. I thought, oh my God, that's incredible, because she was doing poetry out of, very African, West African influence, but jazz. I mean, of course, there's links there.
Yeah.
And she was performing her poetry. And that was like, whoa, that just sent electricity through me. And then when the first time I ever got to travel overseas was for they used to have this big poetry festival in Amsterdam. And it was wild. It was really crazy. And I remember going to one of the performances of Linton Kwesi Johnson, the dub poet. And he was just reading poetry. And by the end of it, we were all moving like that. He was just by the cadence of his
Yeah.
reading.
Yeah.
And that really influenced me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't hear Trudell's influence. I just wondered because you know, he had done so much stuff with Honor the Earth that if it was somebody you crossed paths with,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
I knew John.
um, of course, you know, we crossed paths with Louise Erdrich a bit,
Yeah.
and she's
And I'm
also,
friends with Jennifer Kreisberg.
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
Ulali, God, that was a tour de force, and
Yeah,
Pudafe, and
yeah,
some
They were
incredible
hugely
art.
inspirational
yeah.
Yeah,
for us. And we toured with them, and they sang on an album, and the Jennifer sang on my solo album. Um, did they sing on more than one of our albums? I know they sang on
they
one.
sang on Shaming of the Sun.
And every track they sung on is like they made the track. Like they're
So
so
damn
Uh-huh.
good.
powerful. And there's such an interesting mix of women and culture and histories, and they're just like this big pot of soup when you stir them around, and it's like, whoa, that's delicious.
Yeah, I think
And
I used to associate you with, for some reason, maybe you had told me about some relatives that had come from Georgia. That's when we first met or something, because I used to associate you with that area of Georgia,
Yeah.
right on the border there, about, well, where the creek, the Muskogee kind of area.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
that Chattahoochee River,
Mm-hmm.
and that's right, that's Phoenix, Alabama, just on the it's all over
Yep.
that area. It's right
Yeah.
across from Columbus, I mean. And then I have in American Sunrise, my last book of poetry, I have a map of
Yeah,
the
I can see that.
removal trail
Yeah.
of my one the other side. That's my dad's mother's family, Katie Manahui. Her father was Thomas Carr, and her mother was Creek. And I don't have her. I've got her mother's name somewhere. It's in Creek. And then her father's side was her father was David Manahui, who fought Andrew Jackson at the Horseshoe Bend. That was her father.
Oh my God.
So I know
Wow,
all the
what a lineage.
generations. Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah, fighters, and then on my mother's side, real poor sharecroppers who loved
Okay.
poetry and music. And my father's side were leaders. They were some tribal leaders, speakers,
Yeah.
and artists. And then
Yeah.
my mother used to complain about a brother of hers who would buy a guitar before getting his kids shoes. But
Priorities.
they made music. So I
So
figure
you,
I'm somewhere in between the two of
yeah,
them.
you stayed in Knoxville for a while?
Couple
Like,
of years, about two
yeah.
and a half
Did
years.
you like it?
It was different. I
Yeah.
mean, it was what was sad, what was weird. This was the strange thing. But what was so weird is to go back to that part of the world and you were not there.
Yeah.
The presence of the people is very strongly there, but to go there was really something to deal with. It's like being wiped out.
Yeah, I wondered how that
And
felt.
and then to go home, then I thought this is crazy. They fought so hard to stay here on so many sides of my family, and now we're excited to go back to Oklahoma. What do you? That's like a contradiction. Contradiction number 3,258.
Yeah.
you know, how do you deal with that? And I'm sure all of us in this world have contradictory stories in our history, our family histories, and
Sure, but not like that. I mean, that's
yeah.
just like a, you know, it just would feel it. I can't imagine being in those shoes to like know that the whole, all the communities just erased. I mean, the
Oh,
spirit's there.
it's bizarre. It's very bizarre. And then, and if I could live someplace, if the people were there, I would be living down in that area.
Sure.
But why would I go there and not have my community there?
Sure. Yeah.
Joy, I
Yeah.
was going to ask you. I know we don't have tons of time. I don't think left. I'm not sure what time you have to leave, but
Yeah, I'm not either.
I was going to ask you about the power of memory. And actually, I was really struck by "Washing My Mother's Body," that poem, and living in memory. And so there's what we think of as life right now in the present, but that there's the way you describe life in memory as if it is the present or two different realms, but the same. Can you speak to that? So the first line, I never got to wash my mother's body when she died. I returned to take care of her in memory. And then, of course, in the poem, you go on and speak of the ritual of taking care of her. Can you?
Man, that poem surprised me because I was deep on my father's side,
Mm.
deep in that history. And I'm sitting there one day, and then this poem just starts, just like I just had to follow it. It
Those
was,
it's
I cut out about three long big stanzas, but
hmm.
it didn't really need them in the end. And I've cut out of one, or I think I've cut out one since then. But I mean, the poem, they teach me, and it's like, well, you can go back. And one of the purposes of that poem is to show people that we carry so much sometimes, and we carry history, and sometimes we carry regrets. And I remember when my mother passed that we were there with her, and we didn't know it was going to be. She just kind of suddenly, but we were then my sister and my niece, and we're all there. And so then my sister leaves, and I'm sitting there with my mother's body, talking to her and doing prayers over her, and then I think I'm going to wash her body. By then, my sisters called, I don't know, I guess the funeral home. I was going to say the undertakers, but that's such an old term that would probably make me sound like I'm 2,000 years old. But, and the next thing I know, here come these strangers in suits. None of my family ever wears suits, coming in to take my mother's body. Well, you think that is a sacred,
Mm.
that moment is so sacred because the door opens and we're standing there looking in the door, and there's still her essence. The earth essence is still there with her. And we're going to give her over to these strange men to put and take her. It's like, no. And that's what I said. I said, no, I want to wash her. I want to spend time. I want to do what I did in the poem. And then it was turning into a conflict. And I
Mm.
thought, no, this time is so sacred. I do not want to add I don't want to add disturbance to the play. I don't want to add that. And so I let her go, but I walked with next to her body all the way out there and stood there in honor, because for anyone, all of us, it doesn't matter known or not known, somebody who's done, picked up the beloved helpers who pick up our garbage, any of us, what a life. We are born here to live and to experience life. And what a journey that is. What a journey. You think about what every human goes through, all kinds of stuff. And we have tests that most people know nothing, will never know anything about. But what a journey. So I wanted to honor her journey and walked her out. But I think too about how in these times that of processed food, that really isn't often food, and it's not made for, it's made for money. I think about tobacco, which was a sacred plant, being processed or colonized is what I think of it, colonized. Our rituals colonized for money or even birth. I've got stories about all of that, where I've had little grand nieces and everyone being, people wanted to schedule their deliveries and they wind up having cesareans. It's because it's become more about money, or, these processed, a kind of process for insurance or for money,
Mm.
and birth, death, those moments that the door opens. We have to take those. We have to. Those are ours. Those are ours. And I think about where we are right now in this country, and we're at one of those points, those emergence points. And it's been a bloody birth, but we can all, if we help move this new becoming together, it's a powerful moment and sacred. And in those powerful and sacred moments, death and life are right there together.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so music, to get back to music and poetry, they help us carry those. They're containers. That's how I think of, that's how I can go into write. It's like, oh, this is a container. I can deal with it. It's not everything in the world. Because I tend to think, it's like, oh, here's a moment. I can live in, if I listen to the music, I can be here in this moment. And
It's a
that
good way to
poem is
look at it.
why, yeah, that's how I've learned to get over state and just to be.
Mm.
Like I always wanted to improvise, but I'd be terrified, but I love to improvise. Just listen to the music. Yeah, it's important, if we just move through our story and being as aware as possible and with no judgment, no judging others. That's been my big lesson. I've been the last few weeks I've been thinking, oh my gosh, how much time have I spent judging other people? When normally I don't think of myself that way. I think of myself probably in too rosy a terms sometimes. But I was realizing that, you know, this all could be a little lighter. That's not your place. There's no place for that.
Mm.
And of course, what we've gone through in the last year in this country, it's easy to fall into that.
Yeah.
But I try to remember, and some people aren't kind, some people are mean, and some people are hateful. And I
Yeah.
just try to remember to keep an integrity to my story and do what I was put here to do. And the music the music enlarges. You know, it's there. Like, I think one of my favorite tunes, well, I like Rabbit Invents a Saxophone,
Yeah,
but
that's a great. That's so playful and like,
yeah,
uh, I guess sexy is the wrong word for it, but it's like and it's just yeah, it's it feels risky. I like it.
yeah, that
Like it's
one I
really stepping
felt
out.
was really me. I mean, they
Yeah,
all are. I mean, but By His Beauty was what is for, it's, I say it's for missing and murdered Native women, but
yeah,
it's for honoring, honoring
yeah.
the female. And then I put in a little song, like a Muskogee song I'd written to. It's a little prayer song in the middle. Yeah, Hayat
That's so
Kalan.
cool.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Did becoming poet laureate? I'm imagining you were a little nervous when you got that.
Yeah, I
So
was shocked.
did it? I mean, and then the work you did, the vision you had for the mapping of the lines of poetry and the stories and just the maps, so people can bring in can assimilate the beauty and the diversity and all the things of the indigenous stories. So, I mean, all the projects you've done since you became poet laureate are like, holy shit! Like,
Some of that's being inside during the pandemic, and
Really?
yeah,
getting the
right,
time,
yeah,
because
It's
I would
so
have been
pretty.
traveling every week, and this
yeah.
way it gave me some time, some downtime. I mean, we were going to work on that project anyway with the Library of Congress. We're still working on it. Now we're working on a toolkit, and then the
That's
book of
amazing.
it will be out in May, the book of that
Amazing.
project. And then I have a new memoir called Poet Warrior coming out in September.
And then the
And
Norton anthology, The Light of
yeah,
the World. Oh my goodness!
that was a lot of work.
Did
That was a lot of native poets. We all put it together.
It's so important that having
Yeah,
that anthology is really, really
yeah.
important.
And also the point you make about the difference between written and oral language and the complete prejudice about written language um, from the white Europeans and how that was the bar that was set for poetic experience. And that just was so insightful and important for me to read. And um, but I was wondering, when you became poet laureate, you took on all these incredible projects. Did you feel any pressure or any? Did it stir you in a direction for your poetry? Did it change your working habits for being a poet, or was it just more organic? So, like working with all those native poets who put the Norton anthology together, did that just speak to your life and your poetry, just the way if I might watch a really good film might speak to my work or something like that? Was it more organic, or did it change your life as it related to your work?
Well, I've been doing the work of poet laureate for years. I mean, just traveling a lot. It was not been until the recent few years that I've been really so recognized for my work.
Mm.
I've done it
Hmm.
for years, kind of under the radar,
Yeah,
for years and years and years, up until a few years ago.
yeah,
And but that's not why I do it, to be recognized. I do it because I love it, and it's directly been helpful, I think, for our communities, for Native people, for women, for people.
Mm.
And so the poet laureate ship, certainly it was like lightning, and suddenly I was being interviewed by everyone, and it has given me a certain kind of place. I mean, certainly it put me in another whole arena
Mm.
of being seen,
yeah.
because poets generally aren't. I mean, I didn't know I was going to do that. I mean, I was shocked when it happened, but I didn't have any idea that it was going to do what it did. And I think part of it, more so than some other poet laureates, it has to do with the timing. There's a lot of timing stuff, a lot to do with pandemic, with racial reckoning and social justice, all of this coming together in this big mess. people sorting out things and violent, racial violence and all. So the poet laureateship coming into this position during all of this, and people returning to poetry and to music in ways that they haven't
Mm-hmm.
felt, where people are coming to it because they realize how absolutely necessary it is and how much they need it in their lives. And so
Yeah.
all of this kind of came together. But I'm in my room working. I mean, for the most part, yeah, for the most part, I'm over here just doing my thing,
Right. It's not as
and hanging
glamorous, is
out.
it?
But I mean, that's it. And then you get on the, I haven't been out, well, especially with the pandemic, I haven't been
Right.
out being poet laureate. I've been doing it virtually, which is, it's another thing, it's another thing. At least we can talk here, and it has its moments. Yeah. So anyway, all of it, what's been cool about it is, it's a doorway. It's the position is a doorway. Say, hey, natives we're still alive. We haven't all been killed off just because we don't wear our ceremonial clothes that mean we're not here, and you're not wearing your ceremonial clothes from your people all the time,
That's funny.
Yeah. I didn't come up with that. I was
I like
years
that.
ago in the 70s. I was with is Archie. It wasn't Archie Fire Lane Deer. Yeah, that's who it was. A bunch of us were in Rotterdam for indigenous rights something, and he got out in front of all of the Dutch people and says, where are your wooden shoes? And it's just
That's
that's what you do to us.
that's
Yeah,
funny.
Yeah,
that's
so that's where I
Very
got it
poignant.
from. Yeah.
good. Thank you
It's
for
great
your
to talk to you, Joy.
time.
Yeah, it was great talking to you guys too.
Yeah, really inspiring.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is totally. I feel I love poetry so much, and you're right. I have found myself in the last year and a half or so really focusing on poetry. So it must be something about the pandemic. I don't know, but I've discovered a few new poets that I didn't know about before, and just really focused on it. So,
Well, my son sent me, you're closer to my son, it works for the railroad.
ah,
And then he gets in these moments. I mean, he loves music, and that boy. I don't know why he doesn't do it. He could play any instrument. He would just pick it up,
yeah,
and he could do the best beat, all of that. And he doesn't do it. He's been working with the
huh,
railroad, but he sends songs. That's how he talks to me.
that's
He
cool.
sent yours closer to fine the other night. Yeah,
That's sweet. What a sweet
yeah,
person.
yeah.
That's awesome. That's how he talks
Okay.
to you. Thanks so much, Joy. It's great to see
Thank you. I
Thank you,
look
Joy.
forward to being in person at some point.
you. Yeah,
Yeah,
we do too.
totally. Look forward to hearing
Okay.
you speak and
Okay.
play.
Okay.
See
Bye.
ya.
Safe
Bye.
travels.